Hi, welcome to week 3 of this program looking at your flexibility and mobility. In the last couple of weeks we've obviously covered different specific exercises, stretches and movements for different parts of the body, and we'll continue that today before next week putting them all together into some sort of nice flow. I'm not going to call it yoga, but it'll be akin to something like that, working on a nice set of movements you can link one to the other. In today's video, we're going to cover a little bit more information about what it is that we mean when we're talking about the nervous system being responsible for our flexibility and mobility at any point in time, and how we can influence that so that we can make gains for a longer period of time. So you may have noticed, if you've done particular mobility programs in the past, or you've just been playing with this one over the last couple of weeks, that you might feel like you get a better range of movement, you feel a bit more flexible after the following along with the videos, but it doesn't take too long, maybe a couple of hours, maybe a day or so, when the effects seem to go away again. And so you might be wondering, well, what good is this? If we go back to thinking about the nervous system being responsible for how far we can move at any given time, what our range of motion is at any given time, and we interpret the nervous system as being like a protective mechanism, then we can begin to understand perhaps why it varies day to day, why our range of movement can vary depending actually on how we feel and what else is going on in our lives as well. And then also how we can manipulate that understanding to make these gains last a little bit longer and a little bit longer, so that we actually get more benefit out from them. So if the nervous system is controlling your range of movement because it's responding to perceived safety or perceived danger, we have to remember that there are other influences coming in that modify that perception by the nervous system. So it could be a bad night's sleep, it could be pain from a different injury, or it could be that you might be suffering from sort of some mental health challenges that particular day, and as a result your nervous system's a bit more on edge. And therefore you might find you feel tighter and more restricted than normal. And that's totally fine, because as those issues move forward or progress or recede, then your range of motion, funnily enough, will actually come back and feel better again. So be kind to yourself if you're doing this program, say you're using each video on a daily basis and you're finding that yesterday you could move better than you can today. There are other factors at play here. But what we can do is we can help the nervous system feel comfortable with moving within particular ranges, and we can do that regularly and expose the nervous system to these ranges under a little bit of load, which we will get to later in the program, which means that it will become more comfortable and the influence of these other factors will lessen slightly. Not completely, they'll never go away. You will always be only as mobile as the thing in here lets you be. But we can provide some good influence, which is why you can see people of all ages managing to regain some mobility and flexibility, but it does take some work and some repetition and some practice. So today, let's talk about some thoracic, so that's our upper back mobility. Tends to be an area that we don't really move much, and actually is responsible for some of our overhead shoulder movements. So yes, we're working on our shoulders, we've been doing that since video 1, but actually our upper back, our thoracic spine, does have a part to play there as well. It also has a part to play to a certain extent in some rotational movements that we do, so we're going to touch on that. We're then going to look at the lower body, and we're going to go back into looking at the lower leg in particular and calf muscles, and so we're going to explore that. Now, I've tried to, so far, make the videos use as few props as possible. There will be a few more that creep in over the next couple of weeks so that you can make as many gains as possible in that regard. But I'm going to keep them as simple as possible and as easy to find around the house as possible. But the one that is particularly useful and isn't really easily substituted is a foam roller. Now, it's not because the foam roller is in fact some sort of God-given gift to exercise. It's really not. It doesn't even have to be a foam roller. It just needs to be a sturdy tube of some form. You can get ones like this one, which are hollow, plastic inside, foam on the outside, or you can get ones that are solid foam. I got some of my early ones, I got them from a packaging company because they happen to make cylindrical packaging. It really can be anything, and particularly for what we're doing today, like I say, it just needs to be a sturdy tube. The other bit of kit you're going to see me using today is a step, and that's only because I'm outside. It's too nice to be inside. You can use any step you have around the house. It can be your stairs, it can be a pile of bricks for all I care, so long as you're safe and don't fall off them. And I'll show you what we're going to use that for later. All right, so it's only 2 bits of kit today, but really, if you can get your hands on one of these, don't spend silly amounts of money on them. Look on Amazon for something dead cheap, and they are quite useful, particularly for upper back stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do, as per usual, is adjust the camera, make sure that you can see me properly, and we'll go from there. All right, so when we talk about the thoracic spine, what we actually mean is the section of the spine that your ribs are coming out from. Okay, so it's not part of the back that we tend to move that much or think about moving that much, because we tend to treat it as fairly rigid. But it does move, it can move, and it should move. Not a lot, but it should move. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk thoracic extensions and thoracic rotation. Why? Well, funnily enough, we do move it into what's known as flexion quite regularly. Now, flexion in this regard is known as forward bending. And you will find yourself bending forward quite a lot. It may be to work at the computer, it may be to pick things up, it may be to do all sorts of different things. But bending forward and bending the top of our back is a fairly common movement. But because we're trying to expose the nervous system to different movements, to make it feel comfortable, to get it familiar with what we're doing, we want to expose it to the full range of movements available to us. And so for us, for our back, that's extension, going backwards, and rotation. Okay. Now, rotation and extension we can do sitting down. It's a bit challenging, but we can do it. And it's easiest to access it whilst actually lying down and making use of the foam roller, which I will do shortly. So we're going to start with doing the sitting down version first. Now, for this, ideally what you would have is a fairly low-backed chair. Now, I don't have a chair with a low enough back for me, because I'm actually quite short in the body. So what I've done is I'm being a complete child, and I have stacked up my chair with lots and lots of cushions. The effect will be the same, but just don't laugh too loudly when you see me doing it. We're going to start with that. So now I'm on my throne, feeling a little bit like Princess and the Pea. What we're going to do is some extension work. Now this we do very carefully, very gently, not because the spine is fragile, not because we're going to cause ourselves irreparable damage, but just because we don't do it very often, and so we don't want to spook ourselves and our nervous system by slamming back and putting ourselves under more strain than really we need to. Okay, so we're going to lean back in our chair. We want the back of our chair below our shoulder blades. We don't want our shoulder blades on the chair. So if the chair is too high, either do what I've done and boost yourself with cushions, or try and find a lower backed chair. But with our shoulder blades over the chair, we can just lean back, and we can bring our arms up over as well. and you'll notice I'm sort of pulsing into the movement. As I say, we're not looking for a huge range of movement here. This isn't like moving our hips or our shoulders. This is moving, but it's really important that we're moving those joints and we're accessing that, that range, because as I mentioned previously, it actually does help us with overhead mobility. And when you're feeling comfortable, you can then obviously lean back and just relax as much as you can into the movement. Okay, so that's extension. Now, while I'm in the chair, I'm going to do some rotation movements as well, and then we'll move to the floor. So rotation, you don't need the cushions for this bit, but I'm going to leave them in. It is fairly simple. It is just a case of rotating and then using your hands maybe on the arm of the chair, maybe hooked over the back of the chair, to help increase how far you're turning. Now, there are a few important points that go along with this. When we're doing our rotations, we want to start the rotation from low down and make the higher up bits turn later and later and later. What I mean by that is, I want you to start the movement and lead the movement first with your hips, then the bottom of your ribs, then your shoulders, and finally, last, your head. I don't want you to lead with your head. Okay, because it puts the emphasis in the wrong place. So we're going to sit up nice and straight. We don't want to be doing this with a bent back. We're not going to get as far. So sit up nice and straight. We're going to move our hips, our ribs, our shoulders, and then our head. We're going to relax, sit up a bit straighter, because you will have slumped a little bit, and then do it again. And then sit up a little bit straighter and do it again. And you may have noticed, I don't know if you could see, I felt a little bit, you might be able to see, that I've managed to turn a little bit further each time, but the effort that I felt and the stretch, if you will, the mobility that I felt was about the same intensity each time. So I went into it, relaxed into it, came out, went back in, relaxed, came out, and went back in a third time. I'm going to turn my back to you now by rotating the other direction, just so you can kind of see it from the other side. Nice. All right, so now I'm going to move the chair out of the way. I'm going to change the camera slightly so I can go down to the floor, and we're going to start using the roller. All right, here we are. We've got our foam roller or sturdy tube of some form. So essentially for the thoracic, we're just going to use the tube like we used the back of the chair. The upside of doing it on the floor and with something that rolls is we can actually if you will, position that back of the chair, that pivot point, at slightly different bits of our spine relatively easily. If you were doing that just sat in a chair, you could stack up more or fewer cushions. But with a roller, it's a bit easier to do. So I'm going to do that now. So here we go. So essentially, I can leave my bum on the floor. I don't have to hold myself up, particularly here. And I can just start losing my sunglasses, but just opening up my back. So you can see I was just moving slowly up and down my back, doing the extensions, and I brought my arms in to help as well, just to get a bit more leverage and just to kind of practice getting that nice overhead mobility. So the next one we're going to do is we're going to look at the rotations. Okay, now again, this is a really nice move to do on the floor because you can have lots of space. So if you can lie down on the floor, this is a cracking one to do. I'm keeping nice and straight back, I'm keeping nice and relaxed, and I'm aiming to get a nice twist. Now I'm in this nice twisted position. What I actually want to do is take this hand that's popped off the floor, and I want to look towards it and try and get it back, it and the shoulder back down to the floor. If I want to increase the stretch, I can take my other hand now on my knee that's popped off the floor, and I can try and bring it to the floor while I'm bringing this hand to the floor on the other side. So I'm opening up and I'm getting a nice twist. So I'll show you from a different angle now, and I'll do my other side. Lovely, so that's our thoracic rotations and extensions, both seated and lying on the floor. All right, now we're going to move on to the lower body, and we're going to be looking, as I say, specifically at the calves. So I'm going to leave the camera positioned as it is because you're essentially going to be looking at my legs. Okay, so here we are. We're now going to work on the lower body, and today in particular, we're looking at the calf complex. So I've got with me my step. You can obviously use your stairs, you can use your pile of bricks, you can use whatever you want that gives you a small step. It doesn't have to be high at all. A couple of inches is actually probably enough. I've also got my stick. I'm only going to be using this for balance. You can use a wall, the banister, someone who happens to be passing by, you know, anything to help you keep balance. So a very quick anatomy lesson. With any luck, you can see my calf here. What we actually have is two separate muscles within our calf. We have the soleus, which is the part that starts at the bottom and then seems to disappear into in towards the bone, and it actually finishes about here. And then we have the gastroc, which is the bulgy bit at the top, basically. And you'll notice that there's actually two parts to it, inside and outside, pretty much. Now, the reason it's important to notice that there are two parts to the calf is because actually both of them come down and become your Achilles tendon, and they go around your ankle. That's great. But at the top, only the gastroc, only this top bulgy bit, actually goes and crosses the knee joint. The soleus actually stops about 2/3 of the way up your shin. So when we're trying to elicit a stretch out of each of the different muscles, we actually do need to have our knee at slightly different positions for when we're eliciting the stretch. So in short, there are two different stretches that we're going to do for the calves. Now what we're going to do, and I appreciate I've disappeared out the screen for now, but that's just so that you can see my feet, is we're going to place the ball of the foot on the step so that our heel is off the step. Okay, we're going to use, in my case, my stick for balance, and I'm going to just pick the other foot up. Doesn't really matter what you do with it. Now if I keep a straight leg and drop my heel, now I'm getting a stretch in the gastroc, so the big bulgy bit at the top. If I come back up and I bend my knee and I sink down, now I'm getting a stretch in my in the soleus, the lower part of my calf. Now if you're a runner, you will perhaps find that this stretch is a little bit more satisfying, because it's usually the soleus that drives and acts as the powerhouse for running. Okay, so I'm a long distance runner, so for me this is a kind of a daily occurrence, this kind of stretch. As you can see, I don't actually go that far. That's because runners tend to be quite tight through here. That's actually really useful for power generation, but it's still a good idea to do the stretch. So we're going to do the opposite leg now. We're going to start with straight leg, drop the heel, move my legs so you can see, drop the heel, and so I'm getting a little bit of a stretch in the top part of my leg. And then we're going to bend the knee and we're going to move that stretch to this lower bit of the leg. Okay, so that's the calf complex. The other lower body stretches we're going to do today, kind of the last ones in the lower body that really require a bit of attention on a semi-regular basis, most of us will find we're quite tight through here, are what are known as the adductors. And they are the muscles on your inner thighs. They are the muscles that would bring your legs together. So I'm talking about the muscles that sort of start down your knees and they come up to within your groin. They are the muscles that if a football player complains of a groin strain, that is the area that they will have injured. So the adductors, as I say, they bring your legs together. So if I started like here, I'm now using my adductors to bring my leg in. Okay. So it makes quite a lot of sense that to stretch them, therefore, we'd want to be taking our legs out. It is the splits that is the ultimate form of an adductor stretch, and you won't be surprised to hear you will not be seeing it on this video because I can't do them. But that doesn't matter, because what we're doing is we're sort of working towards that as opposed to actually that being a particular target. So fairly simple for adductor stretches. I'm going to show you two types. I'm going to show you dynamic and I'm going to show you static. And I'm going to show you, particularly for the static ones that you can do either one leg at a time or two legs at a time. I mean both legs. You're unlikely to be doing three legs at a time, but I'm not judging. So in this scenario, it's very, very challenging to do these seated. So we're going to be doing them standing. So, I mentioned the splits before, and that is essentially what you can work your way yourself down into. And you'll notice that I'm using my feet to slowly walk myself out until the point that I start to feel a little bit of a stretch. And you can bend forward and push your hips backwards in order to feel a little bit more of a stretch on the inside here. And essentially you can just hang out here, and this is pretty much an adductor stretch. Okay, now this can get uncomfortable pretty quickly for some people, so it's not necessarily the nicest one to start with. Instead, to start with, we are going to try and do one leg at a time, and you may find that you need something to balance with. But we're going to pretend we're Russian Cossacks and doing dancing. And so we're going to put one foot out to the side. We're going to come into a bit of a split. We're going to have our toes in the air, heel on the floor, and we're going to sink down. And that is a nice adductor stretch. And we're going to come up and we can move to the other side. So we can either sit and balance in this position, and this is a nice static stretch, or we can slowly move from side to side, getting a little bit deeper and a little bit lower each time. And this is our nice dynamic adductor stretch. Okay, so that's covered our calf complex and our adductors. As always, when you're thinking about which ones to employ pre and post workout, try go dynamic, movement based, not holding stretch for a long time, moving into it and out of it. Dynamic pre-workout, and save the static long holds for post-workout. The reason for that is because you can actually reduce the amount of power available to actually do the workout with. And there's no point in doing that if we don't need to. So keep practicing these on a regular basis. A couple of times a week is perfect. Remember, we're training the nervous system as much as anything else. So we want to keep it nice and calm, nice and relaxed. We're avoiding pain, but we do want to do it repetitively. We are training ourselves here. And I will see you for the next video.